Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Lisa C. Today, we have a treat. We know that professional women are making moves in their industries, all across every industry. The Commission on Women in the Profession of the American Bar Association released numbers revealing that among general counsel for Fortune 500 corporations, only about 21.6% are women. And in the 200 largest law firms, it was found that a mere 4% of managing partners are women. This was stated in an article on lawcrossing.com. It's no secret that there is a low gender percentage of women in most male-dominated industries who are at the top of the company. There are also several common challenges professional women face in general, such as not respected like their male counterpart, underestimated as a professional, susceptible to health challenges, struggling with work-life balance, and for women lawyers, get this one, criticized for their looks. So for our female lawyers that are listening, have you ever been told you don't look like an attorney? Wow. It can be a challenge to be taken seriously as a female professional, even with the right credentials and education. Our guest today, Marianne Trost, CEO of Women Lawyers Coach, is a well-respected and well-recognized consultant who helps women lawyers succeed at the business of the practice of law. If you are a female attorney or are a woman in any professional industry that may be male-dominated, this podcast may just be a turning point for your career. You'll be hearing from one of the nation's leading business development coaches who's worked with more than 3,000 attorneys over the past 30 years in the United States and in Canada. Please welcome to the show, Marianne Trost. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you, Lisa C. I'm excited to be on the call with you today.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you. Love seeing women making major moves in their industry. So, Marianne, there's a lot to unpack here. The old saying that we all know is, we've come a long way, baby. It's true, but there is still a road to travel, wouldn't you say?
There absolutely is. For example, in the legal industry, which is my niche, we've been graduating women lawyers 50-50 out of law school for over 30 years. But the statistics that you quoted are correct. 4% or so of the managing partners in the AmLaw, we call them the AmLaw 200, the largest 200 law firms, are women, and that means the other 96% are men. And that's far from the 50 statistic. So there are clearly additional challenges for women in the profession, and my goal is to assist women in overcoming those in any way I can.
Well, I'm sure there is no issue women have faced in the practice of law or any male-dominated profession or professional industry that you're not aware of. Can you speak to the challenges you have heard your clients, female professionals, what they're facing in their industries, be it law or any other industry?
Well, there are many of them. I'll just touch on a few. Certainly, and I'll start with legal, but this applies, I believe, to women in many professions that are male-dominated. The first one that women in law come up with a lot is access to opportunities to develop a client base, access to working on, for the top clients in the firm, generating their own, what we call books of business, being included in leadership, as you've mentioned that statistic. There are challenges achieving origination credit. There are challenges, which is the credit that you get for ownership of having brought in a new client into the firm, for example. Mm-hmm. And then with the in-house statistic that you mentioned, some of the challenges there are making certain their voice is heard, making sure they have access to opportunities for advancement, making sure that they're given the types of professional growth opportunities that their male colleagues are. We still have a ways to go in that, but I have seen improvements over the years. As you mentioned, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I definitely see the progress. We just have a ways to go.
Absolutely. And you've been on both sides of the coin, and you also work with attorneys, female attorneys that have their own practice or work at a law firm. Is that correct?
Yes. When I first started, my focus was on women who were in law firms who were working to develop their own client base so that they could advance to partner, so that they could make more money, so they could achieve leadership positions in their firm. And that was my focus, because I had seen in the first half of my career that women had additional struggles. Many women, not all women are the same, not all men are the same, but there were consistent struggles that I saw women lawyers facing in terms of achieving those goals.
Well, let me jump in right there, and that was specific to working at a law firm, correct?
Yes, in law firm.
And obviously that's true, because the statistic still shows what was that, 4% managing
Correct.
partners.
And then also the equity partners. Those are the partners who have ownership in a law firm. Those statistics aren't anywhere near the 50-50 graduating out of law school statistic I mentioned over the last 30 years. I think we're still hovering in the low 20% there of the attorneys in a law firm who have ownership in the firm being female. So there continue to be these additional challenges. So I started off working with that population. And then as I came to work with women lawyers more deeply, I started realizing that they were also facing other pressures to create the career that they want, pressure to have the life that they want, pressure to have the flexibility that they wanted. And some of them decided they wanted to start their own law firm. And so I began to coach women lawyers on how to start their own law firm. And just the fact that women can go out and build a successful law firm, in my opinion, shows that we're making progress, because if we start at a place where women don't have their own clients, it would be very difficult to go out and start your own law firm. But women have started to build their client bases, and some have been very successful at that, so successful that they can go off and start their own law firms and therefore create policy and work environments and the type of law firm that they envision and that they would define as being successful in the profession.
Right.
I then moved from that, or I continue to coach that population, but I started to then get more requests from women who had gone into those Fortune 100 companies that you were just quoting the statistic on. Where they wanted to know, how can we advance in our careers? What can we do so we get the general counsel position? How can I have a productive conversation on my professional advancement, on opportunities for growth, on salary and compensation? And so I started working with lawyers in that capacity. And then most recently, they, of course, introduced me to other women professionals in other professions who are encountering the same challenges.
Sure.
And so I've just recently started to also work with accountants, people in financial services, people in engineering, and women in other professions that are male-dominated.
And I bet many of those are women that hold professional licenses. Is that correct? Even real estate, anything?
Are highly, absolutely. And women who hold licenses and are highly accomplished in their careers, but they want to achieve more. And, we've heard the glass ceiling, other kinds of, characterizations of the walls that they hit. But there are barriers and there are challenges. And for many of the women I coach, they are the first in their families to be a professional woman in these careers. And so they don't have the institutional knowledge that someone who might be a third-generation lawyer or a fourth-generation engineer would have access to. And
that's
so
a very big point.
Goals, yes, and we see it too in legal when you have to develop a client base and you start from nothing. You start from not having anyone in your family ever practice law before, without having business relationships that were already established because your family knew this or your family did that or you had a small business or whatever. They start from nothing, whereas many of the very successful rainmakers who are men in law firms, and again, not all, this doesn't apply to all of them, but for many of them, they actually receive their clients from the generation of men before them who pass them on. And so one of the things I work with in my clients is figuring out how do you get in that succession planning line? How do you get to be the lawyer that gets passed the book of business from someone, for example, who's retiring?
Absolutely.
But women often aren't in that progression, and so they have these additional challenges of starting off from zero instead of an already established something in which to build off of, and they're not always in the line for succession.
When you give that example, believe it or not, I'm a athlete, past athlete, and not that I played football, I played basketball, but as the visual that I was getting as you were speaking is a football field, and it sounds like, men who have had generations of attorneys or lawyers in their family history lineage. They can start at like the 25 or 30-yard line where women are starting at the end goal.
In the end zone.
And in the X zone. Right. Wow. And so that's a good place for me to ask you. So how are you helping coach, consult, and helping professional women achieve greater success, whether they are at a major law firm or have their own firm or whatever industry they may be in?
Well, the first thing I do it through coaching and I do it through training. I do women's initiative programs and workshops for women in law firms or women in financial services firms. But when I coach someone, the place I start with is asking them to really give some thought to what they want their career to look like. And that may sound very elementary, but the reality is we spend so much time trying to make sure that we do a good job and we do anything that's asked of us for the most part, that we don't often sit back and think about what do we want our career to look like? What kind of clients do we want to work with? What kind of money do we want to be making? What kind of hours do we want to be working? Where will we be in our lives? Will we have children? Do we have aging parents? Do we have other priorities going on that need to be integrated into our business lives? So I ask my clients, think about what do you want to create? Because first you've got to create that vision. And then I ask them, what is that definition of success for you? The definition of success I have found spans the full spectrum. And it's not always what people think about. I actually have clients who work with me who do not want to become a partner in a law firm. And I have clients who work with me who do not want to elevate to a certain position of responsibility in their companies for certain reasons. And so it's really important when I work with my clients to figure out what do you want to create and how do you define success. Then what we do is figure out, we break down into steps. What are the barriers they're encountering? What are the opportunities that are there? Where's the place to start? How do we make sure that you're utilizing your time in the way that gives you the greatest opportunity for return on investment? Because there's not enough time to be doing all the things that people say you should be doing when you're trying to develop clients or customers. So it's really important to figure out what your own strengths are, find a style that works for you, and then make sure you're aligning your activities with your vision of what you want to create. And I help my clients go through that process. And so helping them make sure that everything they're doing is aligned with their vision.
Absolutely. And it sounds like they get a double benefit by working with you. A, you're a woman. You understand things, and B, you have an enormous amount of experience working at law firms and in that male-dominated atmosphere. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yes. First, I do think it helps a lot that I'm a woman because there are challenges that stem, in my opinion, from societal biases that women in professions that are male-dominated run into all the time. And it's really important, I think, to be working with someone who understands that those biases are real, even the implicit biases, and that can speak to those and offer techniques and strategies for overcoming them. So, for example, one of them is stating accomplishments. It's something you've got to do in business. It's the answer to the question, why should I hire you? And you've got to be able to answer that question. But when a woman explains her accomplishments, she's going to be very careful that she does it in a way so that she doesn't come off as being boastful, braggy, arrogant, all these labels that we can, suddenly find ourselves with. Whereas if a man were to answer that question, he'd say, well, let me tell you how accomplished I am. I've done this, I've done this, I've done that, I've done that. And the impression that would be received from that is, oh, he's very confident. But typically when I'll ask my audiences of women, and I may have more than 100 in the room, when you do this, what does it feel like? What is the impression? No one ever mentions confidence because it's not received that way. We run the risk of getting labeled with those things, and it's a real thing. And so I work with my clients, for example, on figuring out how do you state an accomplishment so that you stay in your power, you're sharing information that helps the other person understand your expertise, but you're also not crossing that very thin line that we have in our society that makes you suddenly appear to the person you're talking to as if you're any of those adjectives that I just mentioned.
Sure.
Another area I work with them on is self-advocacy, because as much as we would all like to think that people will ask us to participate and automatically think of us to include us in an opportunity or offer us the amount of money that we think we should be earning, the truth is, in business, you've got to ask for it. It's not what you negotiate. It's not about what you think you deserve. It's about what you negotiate. And so I work with my clients to help them articulate in a way, again, that's authentic to them, what their value is, how they contribute to the bottom line, what it is that they bring to the law firm or the corporation, and how to articulate that in a way so that they can ask for the salary, the bonuses, and the opportunities that they believe they deserve. But it can be tricky to ask those things, particularly as a woman. And so I focus on many of those types of challenges. I would say there's one more, asking for the business. Very difficult. Many of us struggle with the ask. When I'll be in a room filled with men and women and say, how many of you enjoy asking for the business? I have no problem with it. Most of the men raise their hands and wonder why I'm asking the question. But when I ask that question, I have asked that question in rooms with more than 100 women in them, and not a single woman has raised her hand. Occasionally one or two will raise their hands. But that's because asking for the business can also be very uncomfortable, awkward, and there's some societal biases there. So in answer to your question, as a woman, I get that those biases exist. I have worked to overcome those challenges myself, and I enjoy working with other women to help them find a way that authentically works for them so they can overcome those challenges. And then I think you had also asked about my experience. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I was one of the first law firm training professionals in the United States back in the 80s when law firms were realizing they needed to create training programs to help their lawyers continue their professional advancement in law firms. And then a few years later, it became apparent they also needed someone to assist them in professional development. And I was the first professional development professional in the country. So I have been working on professional development for men and women my whole career. But 13 years ago, I stepped out on my own and decided I'm going to focus exclusively on women and help them learn the rules of the game and how it's played, because to your point at the beginning of the interview, those statistics are still real and there are still challenges, and but they can be overcome. They can.
Is there something in particular that gave you the bug to focus your coaching and consulting practice on professional women and specifically women lawyers? Yes.
As I mentioned at the beginning of my career, I worked for many years in one of the AmLaw 100s, which would be the comparable Fortune 100s for law firms. And I saw that women had additional challenges in making partner. One of the challenges I remember is one of the attorneys went on maternity leave for her third child and wanted to come back and work part-time, and the firm didn't have a part-time policy.
Let me jump in right there. Practicing while pregnant, right?
Yes, and I noticed that some of the things that women face in their careers, this was long ago, law firms had not really had an opportunity to think through. Now most law firms have maternity policies and part-time policies, et cetera. But I did see that there were these additional challenges, and decided it was actually, I had to step out of the profession for 2 years because of a health challenge. And when I was working on that and spending an awful lot of time thinking, if I ever get through this, what do I want to do in the world? How do I want to make a difference? I thought, I want to pick a sector in legal, because of course I love legal. I want to pick a sector in legal that really, really needs what I've seen and what I know to be true. And I know that that's women lawyers. And so I decided I'm going to become the women lawyers coach. And ever since then, I've been working with women lawyers and now branching out into more professionals, because so many have told me it's not just women lawyers who face these issues, it's women professionals in male-dominated industries who face these issues.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me this, myth or reality? Here's the question. You can enjoy your law career working for a firm as much as you can having your own practice. Is it a myth that you can enjoy your law firm working for a law firm, or is it a reality? Is it a myth that having your own having your own law practice, you can find joy, or is it a reality? Myth or reality for both of those?
Okay. So first question was, is it a myth or a reality that you could enjoy working in a law firm more than having your own firm? That's a reality. It's true. You can. And the reason is that when you start your own law firm, you're starting a business. You're being an entrepreneur as much as you are being a lawyer. In fact, most of my solo clients say they can't bill more than 100 hours a month because they spend so much time on business development, administrative management issues of building their firms. So you've got to be the kind of person who wants to start out, become an entrepreneur, have your own practice. You're okay with the ups and downs of cash flow. You like to handle all the administrative challenges. You have a vision for your firm. That's a certain kind of person, and not everybody's like that. And in fact, many lawyers are risk averse, and so starting their own firms is not really what they want to do. But what they can do is they can figure out, once they've created that vision that I talked about a little bit earlier, and once they've defined success in the way in which they want to define success for themselves, they can take steps to figure out, how can I make practicing in my law firm more joyous? How can I navigate my career in a way that's more fulfilling? How can I do things a little bit differently so that I can get different outcomes and different results? And, there are cases where I coach women who work on that very hard at their current firm and come to the conclusion that they need to switch law firms and go to another law firm. And sometimes that is the answer. But what's important to remember is, for some it's staying at their firm, for some it's going to another firm, and for some it's starting their own firm. But it really depends on the woman, and it depends on her goals and what she wants to achieve, and also some of her, personality traits, and whether as I mentioned, being an entrepreneur, which I believe you are one, and I am one. So it takes a certain set of skills, and
as Barbara Cochran says, chutzpah.
And chutzpah, exactly. So really important for anyone who's thinking of starting their own firm to not just think about all the wonderful benefits of it, having your own client base, saying yes or no to who you want to work with, being in control of your time and those kinds of things, but also recognizing that you're taking on the task of building a business. And you have to be okay with the demands that will require.
And that's what you help them design and manage.
And I help them. Yes, and I help them figure out whether that's right for them. Oftentimes I'll start, and it's interesting because these are, again, biases, and not all women are the same, not all men are the same. But for example, the first question I'll ask is, how much money do you need to make in order to cover your part of the household expenses, or all of the household expenses if they're primary provider? How much money do you need? Mm-hmm. It is fascinating how many times the answer to that question will be, I don't know.
Wow.
And that's the first place to start. You've got to figure out, what do you need to generate in order to meet the demands that you are responsible for filling? And then you have to figure out, what will it take to meet those demands? And once you start going through that process, then you can figure out what options would work best. In some cases, it may work best to stay at your current firm for a little bit longer, save up, do this and that, and then start your own practice. For others, it may be apparent that this is something they could have done last year, and they ought to just go for it. But it all depends on the person, sure. And that's part of the coaching and training. Yeah.
Nice. So, obviously, like I said in the introduction, all of our listeners, there is some value that value bombs, as they call them, that are being dropped. Marianne, you have been practicing again for over 30 years, recognized as the expert in business development and career advancement for women lawyers, consulting, coaching, speaking at national conferences all around the country. You've achieved a lot in a very male-dominated industry. Can you, and I know this isn't going to be easy, can you share a success story that stood out the most for you? Just, how you helped a woman lawyer achieve something that at the end, once that success came to pass, it really made you feel like what you do matters.
Yes, I'll share two. The first one is very short and very simple, and I think of it often. It makes me smile every time I do. But at that time, I was working in a law firm, and so I was coaching the lawyers inside the law firm. And there was one woman that I was working with particularly who had tremendous potential. And the fun in working with her was helping her recognize how much potential she actually had. And I then, as I mentioned, had a health crisis and needed to leave the profession to take care of my health. And I got a call one day, and she said, Marianne, I wanted you to be the first to know, and I'm letting you know before I'm letting my husband know.
Wow.
She said, I hit my first $1 million in revenue generation, and it was because of working with you. And that just lit the fire in me. I was so proud of her. That's a tough achievement. It doesn't mean she made $1 million. It means that she brought in $1 million worth of revenue through her contacts into the law firm that year. It's a wonderful achievement. So I think that was divinely guided because, of course, that occurred while I was healing. And that was part of what fueled my thinking of, if she can do it, others can do it, and I can get out there and teach them how to do it. So the other example I'll give is one more recently. But I had a woman lawyer come to me and tell me she didn't know much about business development, and if I were to want to teach someone, what would I do? And I talked, and I looked at her and I thought, she's got the tools, she just doesn't know where to start. And I put together a program for her. We started with the very basics. And over the course of time, she got the rhythm. She found her own style. She was tremendously successful. She became a partner at her law firm. Then she had a child and was still a partner at her law firm. Then she assumed a management position in her law firm while also still being a partner and having a child. And that is an extremely difficult combination. And she is doing a tremendous job at it and generating a lot of revenue for her firm at the same time. And one would say, oh, she's a superwoman. And I've got to say, yeah, she is. But I think almost any woman lawyer is a superwoman. It is not easy to get through law school. It is not easy to advance in the legal profession. And in my opinion, every woman lawyer is a super lawyer.
Love it. Love it. So switching reels a bit, millennials and I have something in common that you also share. We both believe in fulfilling personal social responsibility and working with companies that give back. Millennials are huge about that. I see that you've been giving back and are generous with your time. You have helped law students figure out their next steps. You've helped new attorneys who need direction. Can you tell us how you support your sister's nonprofit, the What If Foundation?
Sure. Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Lisa. Yes, my sister, Marianne Trost, started a foundation, I think it was 14 years ago. She had a vision to create a food program to feed children in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And she asked me if I would serve on the board. And so I joined her initial board of directors and served for a few years in that capacity. Then I served as an advisor to an executive director once they hired that, and I continue to make financial donations, obviously, in support of the program, which has expanded. I think when she started with me, it was 200 meals on a Sunday was the goal. Now she feeds thousands, and it's a daily program, and she's built a school, or I should say, I don't want to say she, because she's very, very exact about this, so I want to correct that. In partnership with the community in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and the leadership within the community there, she and the What If Foundation have collaborated to not only expand the food program to feed children daily, but also to build a school and also to have a summer program and also to have classes that help teach women how to do trades and crafts and make things that they can then sell for income. The cooks at the food program are local members of the community who also receive funds for cooking and their participation in the program. It's a phenomenal program. It's called the What If Foundation, and it's dear to my heart because it came out of my sister's vision.
Well, thank you for giving back and fulfilling your personal and corporate social responsibility. So, in closing, what would you like to say to a woman professional, a woman in a licensed professional, a woman attorney? What would you like to say to them in closing?
Yes, the words that come to my mind, Lisa, first thing, you can do it. You can do it. Now, you may need to find resources, you may need to get some help, but you can do it. And I think it's really important for many of us who are the first to travel the paths that we travel, to believe that we can do it, and then to surround ourselves with people who support that vision and can help us get there. So that would be my
That's great advice.
My guidance to all of them. You can do it. Absolutely.
You heard it. You can do it. Thank you, Marianne. So before we close, how can we find out more about the work that you do with women professionals?
Wonderful. Well, I'd say the easiest way would be to go to my website. You could certainly hook up with me on social media. It's Marianne Trost. So connecting on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But also, my website contains information on upcoming programs and things I'm doing. For example, I'm doing a program in Scottsdale, April 22nd to 24th in 2020, in collaboration with another fabulous woman leadership coach. And it's for professional women of all industries. And you can find out information about that on my website, which is www.thewomen, with an E, lawyers, with an S, coach.com.
Excellent. So, again, if you are a woman attorney or a woman that holds a professional license in any and all industries, be sure to see how Marianne Trost is helping women rise to a position of influence, respect, and success. And as I always say in closing, lead with value, and the resources, relationships, and revenue will follow.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.